Hi, everyone. I was asked by the Step Up 21 challenge to do a presentation so that we might increase some awareness regarding health and positioning so that we could do what we could to be a little healthier in how we sit. Um, It's a little tricky in this time of COVID because we're spending a lot more time on computers. So because of that increased screen time, we have a little bit more increased stress on our bodies. So I am Amy Fair. I'm the physical therapist at Phoenix Rehab in Mansfield, and I have been here for going on 21 years. I will disclose that at the beginning of this pandemic, through probably June, I have seen more cervical radiculopathies, more irritation and pain in the arms than I typically do. And I will directly relate that to the increased time we've spent on the computers. So let's talk a little bit about curves. You know, we have curves in our back. We have those and should have those. They're normal. We develop them when we start to walk, and basically they're here to shock absorb a little bit. So our low back should dip in, and we call that a lordosis. We should round a little bit through our ribs and our thoracic spine. We call that a kyphosis. And then in our neck, we should see that lordosis come back, okay? So that's the ideal, and those curves are normal. We have less than ideal postures. So the second one has a little bit more rounding through that kyphosis area, more so than we want it to be. The third picture has a very flattened lumbar spine, and the last has a pretty accentuated forward head positioning. When we look at those pictures 2, 3, and 4, that line down the middle tells us where gravity is. And what we're seeing in all of those last 3 slides pictures is that your head is very displaced beyond that. So as our head is forward in relationship to our shoulders and our hips, we have a lot more work that our body has to do to maintain that. So it's going to be less optimal. We're going to have a little bit more compression on those nerves than we would want. When we sit, we should have the same curves that we do when we stand. The difference is we want to kind of support them if we're going to be sitting for a long time. So the chairs that we're in will make a big difference to the support and the long-term ability for us to maintain that seated posture. That's going to be something we talk about during the course of this. So what I want you to do is I want you to kind of look at where your posture is right now compared to maybe ideally where we want it to be. So I want you to follow these 4 steps. First thing I want you to do is sit forward on the surface that you're on, and I want you to slouch all the way down, kind of curl up in a ball as far as you can. From there, the second thing I want you to do is draw yourself up. I want you to accentuate the curves in your back. I want you to come up as tall as you can, almost like somebody was pulling you by a string towards the ceiling. Once you're all the way there, I want you to just back off slightly. So maybe come out of that 10 degrees and just kind of come back to a more, I don't want to say relaxed posture, but just less aggressive. This is a good sitting posture. From here, we need to try and make sure your chair will support you, okay? But that you can do in your car, get your seat back all the way up, get yourself to a really good posture. I always say in the car, go ahead and set your mirrors. If you're driving and can't see anymore, then you're not in as an ideal position as you could be. So once we know what that good posture looks like, we have to set up our surfaces to make it work. So we have to look from the ground up. You have to look at your foot positioning, your foot related to your knees, your hips, where your spine is, how your shoulders sit, and where your neck is. It should be a kind of fluid, but not necessarily a rigid position, all right? So these are 2 great pictures to kind of denote normalcy. So the first one is sitting, and we're seeing a lot more standing desk setups at this point. So looking at where your posture is, where the chair is, the angle of your elbows, the monitor height, where the keyboard is, they all give you pretty good ideas. So when we're looking across, can we see what we're looking at, or are we tucking down to see where we are? And those are all going to be things that we have to be conscious of. So this slide being in here is something you can refer back to so you can have an idea of where you're sitting and where you're standing. We would like, that work surface to be at or below elbow level. You never want to feel like you're working up higher. Are your shoulders relaxed? Do your forearms and your upper arms have a 90-degree angle, or is it greater than 90 degrees? Are your forearms in line, or are they bent? You roughly want to have about 18 inches between yourself and your screen. Are there things underneath your desk that are not making your knees and your hips line up well? What kind of light source do you have? Are you squinting, or do you have a horrible glare from a window? These are all things to consider when you're setting it up. Chairs are fancy. Some can be your dining room chair. Others can have so many attachments. You can adjust the height of them. You can adjust the back height. You can adjust the contour of the back. You can change the angle of the back. The armrests often can be adjusted down if they need to be, or if they actually are just impairing it, oftentimes they can be removed. My office chairs, I tend to slump if I have some ability to rest. So I've just removed my armrest to take that out. Do you have a big, bulky office chair where those armrests are actually preventing you from being as close to the surface you're working on as you should be? So look at those. You're not necessarily stuck with them. It's usually a couple screws and you can take them off. You want to be able to get your feet flat on the floor. You don't want to feel like you're tipping forward or falling out of your chair. You would like to have 90 degrees at your feet, 90 degrees at your knees, 90 degrees at your hips. So sometimes if the surface we're working on is too high and it can't be adjusted, but you're not particularly tall, I fall into that world. Oftentimes you can build yourself a footrest and bring that ground up to you. Okay. So again, just things to consider with where you're working. Your monitor, the viewing distance should be between 18 and 30 inches. You want to be able to look straight across. This particular monitor, because it's a laptop, is a little lower than I want. We don't want glare. Do we have a desk lamp that's shining right on a specific spot of our screen that's giving us trouble? Is our monitor in line with the keyboard and where we're working, or are you trying to turn your head to the side to see the monitor? Is the monitor clean? It's a big consideration. Laptops. There is no actual good way to make your laptop monitor be at the right height to type. Because it's connected, we can't do that. I'm working on a monitor now and I'm at a correct height to type, but you can see where the angle of the camera is a little low. If I were to spend a long time on a laptop, to avoid some irritation, I may very well just get a Bluetooth keyboard for 20 bucks that's detachable, and I would prop the laptop up at the height it needs to be and type on a different surface. By the same token, oftentimes people will have extra monitors at home. You could plug your laptop in to a different monitor and then not worry about the screen on the laptop as being your primary use. You can set it up for the keyboard height and use a different monitor so that you can get them to the appropriate levels. So just things to consider, especially if you're going to be on it for a long time. What we have to look at too is, what are we trying to do? Are we going to use a mouse? Is it something that we have to reach for? If you're somebody who is working on Excel documents all day and you are going to mouse between a lot of things, is it an appropriate height? Does it have a rest, a cushioning for you to use? If you're on your phone and you need that, is it something you're reaching for, or is it something you're constantly going into a forward bend position to get to? Oftentimes at home, we're working on different surfaces that weren't ideal. So we might not have a tray that we could put our keyboard on and make an appropriate height. So sometimes we have to get the surface is fixated. So like I said, we can bring the floor up a little bit with a footrest, but it might be something that we really have to have the chair up so that we're not trying to reach up at a height. So again, look at main duties. Are we going to be mostly on a laptop with a touch screen, so it has to be easily within reach? Or are we going to be more somebody that uses a mouse? And perhaps, in some of the chairs in the classroom, you'll find that you can flip the table surface down. They have something very similar to that for a wireless mouse to be placed on, so that it can sit on the armrest of your office chair to make it so that it is easier to use and an appropriate distance and height for you. So just keep in mind, depending on where you're going to be and how long you're going to be there, there's some things that aren't super costly that you could change to make it more agreeable. The thing you have to look at is muscle use. Our hands and our eyes are in front of us. That's where we're going to operate from. So that's the direction we're going to move. So in this direction, the tissues on the front of us are generally going to be short, okay? The tissues on the back of us are going to be stretched. In anything, there's an ideal position to be in to use things to their maximal advantage. And neither one of those are too short and neither are they too long. So we have to find that in between. We're going to see things like carpal tunnel, headaches, tendinitises occur because we're constantly shortening a tissue and then we're using it too much. So we can work on the tissue that's short, but by the same token, we have to work on the counter tissues to make them strong. What do we want to do? When we're looking at a sitting or a desk position kind of activity, we want to stretch the front, we want to strengthen the back. We want to focus on our head and our neck being in that neutral position so that our head is over top of our shoulders, over top of our hips, okay? So what do these look like? Here's a couple of examples. One, make sure we have enough flexibility in our neck. I'm not a big fan of doing the circles all around, but really move between those planes. The bottom picture on the far left is going to be somebody stretching their neck. You don't really have to reef on your head. You can generally just put the weight of your hand there will give us a stretch. This is stretching your upper trapezius muscle, which will tend to ride up as you tip. So you can see how he's kind of sitting on his hand. That just helps hold the shoulder down. And honestly, you don't have to turn the head very far then at all to develop a stretch. In the middle, we've got some shoulder rolls and we've got some stretching of the arms and the shoulders. Sometimes it's nice just to make a barrel shape with your hands and kind of just rock in a circle because it'll just stretch out a little bit of everything, including our hips. One of my favorite things is going to be this next slide. So if you want and you have a surface wall that doesn't have a ton of stuff on it near you, you want to stand near the wall and you want to put your feet probably 6-8 inches out in front of you. Bend your knees slightly. This isn't like a wall sit from gym class. This isn't meant to stress your legs a lot. But what I want you to do is I want you to try and get your low back flat against that wall. Once you have your low back there, I want you to try and get your rib cage flat against that wall. Then you want to start to try and get it so that your arms up against the wall and your elbows are touching. And then eventually you want to get to the point where you're at the back of your hands. So you're almost in that field goal post shape, has good contact against the wall. Once you get there, you're going to find it's very hard to keep your low back and your head and your ribs against the wall all at the same time. This is a nice, what we call isometric. It's just a nice holding activity so that you can work on strengthening the back of you because we've already done things to stretch the front of you. And I find this to be a great exercise. I have a lot of my patients do it and I have them do it in various points of the day. If you're going to be on school and you're on a Zoom and you have 10 minutes between your two sessions, stand up, stand against the wall, get your arms up, get everything there, keep yourself flat. Feels like it should be really easy and it's actually less easy than you would expect. So kind of a summary here to wrap it up is the old saying's true. If you don't use it, you lose it. If we sit in one position all the time and we're forward all the time, then we're going to stay forward all the time. So looking at coordinating and toning and using our stabilizers will really improve that back and neck safety. Like I said, we'll see a lot of compression and signs in our hand, tingling, sensations, feeling of numbness or even pain. And that's often associated with a compression of the nerves because of that forward head positioning. I think we'll have a pretty varied age group watching this. Remember, as we age, we lose muscle mass. Every year after the age of 50, we lose roughly 1% of muscle mass every year. We kind of dry out and turn into beef jerky with time. So it is something that we need to do some strengthening to maintain and minimize those effects. Um, Posture's king. It'll define how you use your body and what you're capable of. Um, so we really want to protect it, especially if we're going to be somewhere statically for a while. I really appreciate you guys spending a couple minutes with me. I hope this gives you an idea of how to look at where you're working and some simple things that you could do to change some influence if you need to. The number is at the bottom here. I am in the clinic often. If there's anything you need, please don't ever hesitate. Just reach out and let me know. Thanks so much.